Well, hey, this is officially our 10th episode.
Number 10.
Big number 10. You know, we
We're there.
There's a quote, or a guy named Chris Williamson has a quote out there about 90% of podcasts fail after the third episode.
After the third,
they just stop.
I thought it was 20.
Well, and then what's left over,
or I guess
after the third episode, the people that keep going after 3, 90% of those fail before they get to 20. So we're halfway there, strong.
Right.
And a lot more to go.
The rigor.
Yeah.
Well, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I mean, it's mostly a therapy episode, which is real meaningful to me and quite different than my day-to-day activities. So, I hope that someone can get something out of it. Right. That's why we're doing it.
So what are you thinking about right now?
Oh man, I'm thinking I need a vacation.
Yeah. Why?
We've got a lot going on in our office. So, we're rebranding, which is real. There's a lot of internalized letting go from my side. Yeah. Which I didn't really expect. With things like that, I always think, and maybe until I get to that threshold, that I don't really have any personal attachment to much. I can typically let go of things and not, have too much weight. Yeah. And that's just stuff. Like relationships are different, but sure. Stuff. And I consider branding to be something like that, although you do have an emotional attachment to it since I've been with it for 15, 20 years.
Well, and it's your name.
And it's my name.
On the front door.
And that's interesting. Well, so there's rebranding. We're trying to hire under a real volatile market. And so projects are up and then they're down. And we're trying to hire in a way that we need senior leadership. Yeah. Right. And I think you're maybe going through a little bit of the same thing as well. And so to try to hire with certainty for finances during this market is real unpredictable. Yeah. But it's like this thing that I need and I want, but I can't get, but eventually it'll be there. Yeah. And then the other big one, which because you're building it, is our office, right? Yeah. It's trying to make sure things are buttoned up on our side, organized financially. Again, it's just like all these things are culminating at the end of the year, which I know is relatively slow as well. So, and then we like to have some time to breathe. So it's like a lot of things happening right now.
How do you stay on top? How do you prioritize things?
Well, I have people that will help me prioritize. And, while I was walking in, that's a great question, because while I was just walking in the door, I was thinking I'm pretty good about making lists and understanding what's high priority versus low priority, and then knocking those things out relatively quickly. I don't feel like I'm a slow decision maker. But while I was walking in, I was thinking, man, I gotta, I don't know what's priority right now because everything's on fire. It seems like, and it's really not. Like if I were to back up and slow down and take a couple of days off and realize no one's dying, no one, like it's not. Decisions probably could come a little bit more fluid. But when you're in the trenches day to day and people are just at you about responding and, troubleshooting in the moment, it's a little bit of decision fatigue. Yeah. Right. Which is draining sometimes. Yeah. So,
especially when it goes on for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like things ebb and flow. We're coming off a period of a few months that were very intense. So now it feels weird because, we thought that we were going to ramp up and have a lot going on by now, this part of the year, but everything just keeps getting kind of pushed back a little bit. So it's kind of that calm before the storm. But I find where I'm in the moment, like you're talking about, when you're in the trenches and you're in the firefights, you know, you just want to get through that and get to the other side of it, which you will. But then I tend to miss that a little bit.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, cause we're in this area of, it's kind of slow. And I'm like, man, what am I missing? Like cause I'm used to, and I've learned over the years, I thrive in that chaos.
Absolutely. Well, when you're in the trenches and you're making decisions and things are happening, whether it's fire, just your normalcy, you know, like your normal day of having to operate throughout many different projects, those things are to me, those are givens that you can process through. And whether or not you're making the right decision in the moment, they're decisions in the moment that have a resolution.
Yeah.
Right. That they're somewhat predictable.
Yeah.
Now the other thing, the slowness and the volatility of the market and the like, oh, what's next? What's going to come in January, March? That has me more stressed than anything, obviously, because I don't have a crystal ball. Have
you been there? You've been there before, right?
Oh yeah.
And it always works out.
It always works out.
Yeah.
And you know, I understand I believe there's a lot of faith and understanding that I've been here before.
Yeah.
I've got my head to the grindstone. I'm making the right decisions. I've got a good team. I guess it's going to work out.
Comes with experience. Comes with a little bit of wisdom.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. You know, I can remember about various times in my business career where, you know, I always think about it like staring off into the abyss, going, "What the fuck am I gonna do?"
Yeah.
You know, and like, man, and just having that kind of, it's a terror of like, man, if this doesn't happen and that doesn't happen, like I'm going to have to either let people go, I'm going to have to shut down the business, I'm going to have to, but you know, looking back over, you know, the last 20 something years, it's always worked out.
It's always worked out.
But you know, I'm careful not to get complacent where.
Well, there's the other side of your brain that knows that it will work out, but there's the small portion of your brain that says, well, it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what keeps us honest and driving hard.
Well, I've gotten to where like I'll have a contingency plan. Like I keep a rainy day, shit hits the fan strategy.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if the worst thing happened, you know, I could pull this out of the drawer and do 1 through 5 and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And then I put that back in the drawer and I don't think about it. You know, I go about it now.
What does that entail? Is that financial 1 through 5, or is that dismantling 1 through 5, or is that, oh, I've got this other career idea 1 through 5?
Yeah, interesting. So it's more of the financial, it's more of the strategy with, I mean, people, the strategy with different aspects of the business. Mm-hmm. Phone calls I would make, decisions I would have to make. You know, I've got a worst case cash flow projection. Mm-hmm. It's like, man, if tomorrow every one of our clients called and said, hey, we're going to cancel your contracts, I've got a strategy built from a cash flow standpoint of like, okay, well, here's how we would pivot. Here's how we would start to rebuild over the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And then, you know, worst case, the worst case scenario that it all ends and I go do something else. Yeah, you know, I don't have this written down, but I know in the back of my mind, I would take a month or 2 off.
Yeah.
And I would just go start again. You know, I would go, I've got people I could call. I've got, you know, opportunities I could go and figure out how to start making money again.
Sure.
So I don't worry about it in the same way that I used to, you know?
No. Yeah. The stress is different. It's just a different level, different way of thinking through problem solving in order to get to the next thing. Right. So,
yeah. That's, something I always struggled with was that, it's talking about feeding on the chaos, feeding. I used to want and almost create the worry so that would motivate me to do, to go faster and harder. And that took a while to get past that. It's like, I don't need to have the worry and the anxiety there to motivate myself or to push forward to make certain decisions or do certain things.
Yeah.
It was a weird kind of realization a few years ago that I can let that go. I can be unattached to the outcome of anything and still focus on the day-to-day, like block and tackle stuff that I need to do that will consequence an outcome that I'd like to have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, if you stay in the day-to-day and you understand that really the day-to-day is the thing that's probably going to make you the happiest.
Yeah.
And allow you to breathe when you need to breathe and work hard when you need to work hard. And inevitably the outcome is something, maybe it's in your control or maybe it's out of your control. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's perhaps just keeping the eye on the prize, and the prize is this this fuzzy thing that we all think we understand, but not necessarily. But day to day is critical. So yeah, it's an interesting time, but I always feel a little bit jumbled around the holidays and ending the year and taking off and making sure everybody's taken care of.
Yeah.
But this year seems, a little bit more.
How are you guys thinking about executing the brand change?
Well, we are, we're going to align it with moving into the office.
Mm-hmm.
And so, first off was understanding what a name could be, which we've arrived at. We're not going to announce that here, but we've arrived at. Now we're going through the graphics of the logo and understanding how that aligns with some of our internal goals, things that we value. And then there's obviously the website and all the things that build itself around the name. And then we'll make a big announcement as we move into the office. We'll make a big announcement, and we'll have to have a pretty tight thread that connects back to our name, our current name.
Yeah.
And that will always probably, I'm anticipating it's going to be, no less than a year that we'll have to maintain that little attachment to who we are currently in order for it to stick and have some commonality, a relationship between old and new. But
are you changing any of the fundamental ways that you're approaching work projects? I mean, does the name change represent a different way of thinking about and approaching what you guys are doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It does, actually. And that's why whenever I started, I just, I had nothing, I'm horrible at names. And so I had nothing better at the time than my name. Yeah. Right. And I think our logo, the Odom logo, is really powerful.
Yeah.
And it was not really letting go of my name, but it was letting go of the logo.
Yeah.
Because I really believe in it. I think it looks great. It's whenever people see it, they gravitate to it, and there's no rhyme or reason. It just looks good.
Yeah.
And it just so happens to have my name phonetically attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the directive really, and I've been thinking about it a long time, is traditionally architects have names attached to their offices, right? Mm-hmm. And I do believe, even though we work in a traditional format of architecture, I do believe that we do things differently. We think about them differently, and it's these subtle differences that I'm after, and it's this collaboration. It's how our workflow is implemented during the process of our day-to-day or our annual year. And it's not perfect yet, but it's this thing that we're striving for, that I think that we are this organic collaborative group, that I'm not a micromanager. I want ideas. I don't care if you're out of school or if you're 40 years in the business, your idea is going to have an equal platform in our office. And then I want the builder there. I want all these people that should have an opinion about what we do. I want them at the table. And that's traditionally counterintuitive about how the order of operation goes.
Yeah.
And so there's a mindset here with our name change that will remove my name out of it and allow the office to live and breathe outside of me. Right. And there's also like an exit strategy plan as well, because I do, there's a switch in my mindset at some point a few years ago that really wanted to create something that I could hand off to someone else. And the question about what is this thing, the why, has really been sticking with me, because, the why could be, I want to create a successful business. And what is that? What does that mean? I don't know. In my mind, we haven't reached that yet. So that's something that I'm still working towards in terms of just a business outside of architecture, outside of any industry. It's just, I'm real fascinated to make a successful business.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm there yet. So there's more work to do.
Yeah.
But it's also building something that is, that has value in someone else's mind, that they want to take over and then move along in their own with under a similar envelope or direction, right? And they believe in these core values, and they believe in the name, and they believe in the work, and they believe in it enough that they want to buy in, and they want to have a sense of ownership, and they want to move it forward. Like that's pretty cool. And to create an office that removes the self, the me or the I, is real interesting, because when I do that, then it doesn't alleviate me from any pressure, because I still have to do what I do. And I still have to make sure that the company operates, and we're bringing in projects and so forth. We're creating a certain product that is worthy of who we are. But I also think that it frees up mentally. It frees up the individual to want to have more. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing to work towards.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of layers to that, right?
Yeah.
How do you think that changes the course of where you're going over the next 5 to 10 years? Like what's gonna feel different to a client or to the?
That's a good question. Our existing clients, I hope that they don't feel any difference. I hope that there's a quality difference in how we communicate and how we operate, because it should become more professional in a way that it's tighter. And so I think it's more of an internalized thing that if we're talking the talk, I want to also walk the walk. So service-wise, I don't know. I don't know that there's going to be any real difference, and that's kind of a funny thing to realize, right? Because if you go through the effort of rebranding, you would hope that there is a return. There's an ROI.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's the case here. Right? Because it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time and it's a lot of money. And why do you do it? Typically means that you expect a return.
Sure. Well, maybe not financially immediately.
Yeah.
But
I think there's a bigger value culturally. And when I say culturally, it means that there's a shift in the industry that I'm real interested in. And we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's real subtle. Like it's these subtle changes that I think should happen because it's broken. The way we work is broken. And I think that's the return. That's the give back. Is that, man, one day I hope that we're over 35 people and this thing is a machine and that culture is subtly different than anyone else. You know, the majority of offices that you come into contact with. And if that happens or when that happens, I'm going to hopefully be able to sit back and see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then exit.
Yeah.
What about you? And, you know, I know you're growing and, you know, you're working through staff and layers and freeing up your time.
Yeah. So part of what you just said kind of resonates in terms of, you know, the brand and what you're going to deliver and the experience, right? So, you know, what I've been thinking a lot about lately is as we grow, I think we've got 18 or 19 employees now.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty rapid expansion over the last.
What'd you start with at the first of the year?
Oh, I think we had 5.
Yeah.
At the first, January of this year. More than 2. I think we had 5. And so, you know, what I've noticed is things want to get more complex, right? And what I mean by that is, you know, we've got a lot of great people on the team and we've got a lot going on, and that poses a lot of new challenges. You know, as you get bigger and have more people, there's other needs. And as I've had chances now over the last 2 to 3 months to kind of be a little bit more disconnected with the business, I see things get more complex and more complicated. And where that shows itself.
Why is that? Is that the personalities that want to come in and create their own systems that conflict with the other system?
I think so. I saw that when I was at Torchy's, I saw the same thing, right? And that another, you know, that company grew really rapidly. And as you had more people come in and different departments grew, I mean, my story was that people wanted to put their fingerprint on something. They wanted to have these legacy projects that, hey, I did this, my department did this. They wanted to put a mark on the brand, right? And I've seen that in smaller companies as they grow, and that's one of the alluring things to people that want to come in and be part of a startup is that, hey, I'm here at the you know, inception, and I get to kind of form things and have my fingerprint on stuff as this thing grows, right? And I can understand that. So where we're at now, it's like, you know, we start having these meetings and, you know, people are bringing these new ideas to the table around software or around these different platforms and different ways of communicating and different reporting and all that. And, you know, and I'm a shiny object guy. I'm like, yeah, I like new software. I like apps, you know, I like reports. I like customization. I like automation, you know. But then when you start kind of stepping back and looking at, okay, well, you know, how's the business performing? You know, what and before that, like, what are we really trying to do? Like, what's the result we're trying to generate? Like, what are we being paid for? And you make that, and you start to simplify it. You're like, okay, well, we manage projects, right? We're expected to take a project from whatever point of inception that is and get it to a completion, right? Inside of that, there's a schedule, right? There's a budget and there's an expectation of quality, right? And so the real block and tackle fundamental things that we need to do are pretty simple. And so then you unpack that and you're like, well, how can we get really good at those things? How can we get really good at managing a budget? How can we get really good at managing a schedule? How can we get really, really good at providing a certain level of quality? And it doesn't have to be complicated to do those things.
Yeah.
So, I've started seeing, okay, what are we really good at right now? Well, we've been really fortunate that we've been profitable on every project, right? And our level of quality has been really, really good. Where we struggle right now is managing schedules. And so it's like, well, what do you really need to manage a schedule, right? And again, we're getting a lot of ideas at the table, a lot of different, hey, let's try this software. Let's do these reports. Let's worry about, let's put more processes in place and all that. And it tends to get overly complicated. And so what I'm doing right now with the team is, hey, let's pull back and let's really focus on the fundamentals. Like, what do we really need to be successful? And, what do you really need to manage a project, right? For us, it's, we need a budget, we need a schedule, right? A guy needs a cell phone and maybe a truck.
Yeah.
That's it, right? If you're really good at what you do, you could successfully manage a project with a paper schedule, a paper budget, and a cell phone. That's it. You don't need all the other Procore platforms and we've got Smart Sheets and Procore and a couple other kind of software platforms that have all this automation and all this reporting and spits out all kinds of data. But at the end of the day, you don't need that really to be successful. Now, do you need that to scale? And yes, we need those tools.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to get everybody's focus on like, hey, just do your job. Like, let's focus on what your job is and what the block and tackle fundamental things that you need to do on a daily basis to create success. I love this. There's a documentary with Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, right? The NFL coach and the Alabama coach, New England and Alabama. And, arguably some of the best coaches in history in football. And they meet like once a year formally and they just talk about stuff, right? And they game plan. And so there's this really cool documentary that no frills, no super high production. It just picks up. They come into a room together and they start talking.
Where is that? On Netflix or something?
I can't remember if it was an HBO documentary or on Netflix.
That'd be interesting to watch.
You can Google like Nick Saban, Bill Belichick.
Okay.
But they start immediately just talking about real simple things that make them successful.
Yeah.
And like Nick Saban's thing is just do your job. I think it's his. And Bill Belichick was the same. It's like, just do your job.
Yeah.
Don't worry about everything else. And, I'm not a huge football fan, but, I watch football periodically. And there's a lot of complexity around football. There's a lot of data, you know what I mean? And not to oversimplify what these guys do, but it seems like, they use all the data and they use all this technology and all this kind of stuff, but their main focus is just do your job. Just focus on your fundamental job. And you see that, like I just got done listening to the new biography from Elon Musk or about Elon Musk. And, a lot of the innovations that they made in SpaceX and Tesla and some of these other companies were going back to first principles, and like let's go back to physics, and like the first principles of manufacturing and technology and all that kind of stuff. And for whatever reason, that ended up being revolutionary. So I'm like, man,
it's like Dyson.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Or what's wrong with the system? Questioning what's wrong with the system, and going back to the basics and trying to
cut out
recalculate
process. Like he have he has this thing called his the algorithm, right? And it's like these 6 or 7 steps, and it's about removing processes, removing requirements, like making it really simple. So again, like I'm trying to overlay that over what we're doing right now. It's like, as we're building up this project management team, it's like, well, what really makes us successful? Is it the meeting notes that we take? Because we spend a lot of time. We've spent a lot of time on how do we develop meeting notes, and how does that automatically get sent out to the client and the team, and how do those meeting notes and other documents roll up into this really cool report? But what do you really need to do to be successful with a schedule. It's like it's fast forward to the end is where I'm at. It's like we're influencing people. That's really what we do.
Yeah.
Well, we're influencing people to do a certain thing that adds up to a completed project.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that really entail to influence a person? It's fucking communicating with them.
Yeah.
And as much as you try to automate out steps and processes and all that, there's no replacement from picking up the phone and talking to somebody.
Absolutely. Well, what it's saying, and we probably both know this, but what it's saying is the stuff doesn't matter. You can pick any online data research, scheduling system, Procore, spreadsheet, Smartsheet, but it goes back to the individual that can handle the task.
Yeah.
And if you align yourself with those individuals, which we may or we may not, I don't know, then I think that is probably a better way to think about success.
Yeah.
Knowing that you and I, we can't do it on our own. So we have to surround ourselves with individuals that we trust and that we know that can handle the task.
Yeah.
And when you break it down in a way that do your job, absolutely, that is it. But when you look at the job, yours and mine, is a very difficult job. Like that mine has to be layered in a way that they can pivot and handle multiple situations in one given day that a lot of other people can't.
Sure.
So that brain has to be active in problem solving and stress decompression and communicating in a way that in any given day you're going to be able to communicate under pressure that resolves a situation to clients and people, right? In order to make them move, because that's absolutely it. We have to get people to move and do their jobs.
Yeah.
And as architects and GCs, I always say architects are take the creativity out of it. To get a building done is incredibly difficult. And what we do is we're master orchestrators, right? We have to get teams to move and we have to assemble them and we have to get them coordinated in order for this thing to get built. Yeah. And if you don't do that, then shit falls down quick.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting, as a contractor, we take this abstract vision and we're trying to make it tangible.
Yeah.
You as the architect, you've got to build this abstract vision first, right?
Yeah.
And then articulate how it's going to be made tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's I'm trying to I'm trying to just think in real simple terms, and then kind of get back to the fundamentals, right? It's get back to these first principle ways of thinking. And then with our team, it's like, okay, well, like for our superintendents, it's like we're trying to develop this core four of like, what are the four things you need to do every single day that no matter if it's a shit day or, you're successful, whatever, as long as you do these four things every day, that'll add up to some level of success on the project. Right. And we're trying to drill, like, what are those four things? It's review your schedule. Right. Review your schedule. Where are you at today? Where are you supposed to be? And then is that going to add up to where you need to be next week? Mm-hmm. So like review your schedule, number one. Number two is, check in with your team, like touch everybody.
Yeah.
If somebody's walking onto the site, are you talking to those people? Like, what are you here doing today? Is that what you're supposed to be doing today? Does that align with where we need to be today? And then, are you still tracking where you need to be tomorrow? And are you tracking where that is going to end up putting you next week? Okay. And then, so that's number two is that you're talking to the people that are on the job. Number three is you're forecasting, and you're trying to get buy-in on a vision of where this team needs to be next week or the week after or 8 months from now. Are you picking your head up and looking down the road several steps? And then number 4, we're just communicating that out. Like we're letting everybody know where we're at and where we think we're going to be. Like, so you're full disclosure, bad news first, but we're putting everything out. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if we can consistently do that day over day, no matter what project we're doing, no matter, who's doing it, that's going to add up to a level of success that is sustainable.
Yeah, there's a methodology that should be followed no matter what level you are, right? That creates a simpler system or a simpler way to understand your job.
Yeah. When we were at Torchy's, I'll tell you the quick examples. This is what I really, and again, I think generationally, I push back on technology, right? I'm turning into my parents, right? It's like all this new tech. But when we were at Torchy's, when we were really rolling, our department that I was managing was responsible for a lot of different things. Not only, we were managing the design, we were managing the drafting of the plans, the construction, the facilities, and then we started managing like the licensing of like getting TABC licenses and all that. Yeah. And then we were responsible for communicating all aspects of a store in its different in its life cycle to the entire company. And then multiply that, at the end we were managing 10, 12 projects at a time. And so there was this big push to bring in smart sheets and develop out this really intricate automation that essentially would tell people what to do, right? There was checklists, there was reminders, there was bells and whistles. And so we went out and hired a consultant from Smartsheets to come in and build out this platform. Excuse me. And we sat in meeting after meeting about like, okay, we want this dashboard to look like this. We want this and this. And I started thinking, man, what they really want this tool to do is to ping you when you're supposed to do something. Yeah. And then you just do it. And then it's gonna manage it for you. Yeah. And it's gonna make it real simple. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking away from this one meeting going, this is not gonna fucking work. Yeah. and they started asking my opinion about it. And I said, look, guys, and at the time we had developed this Friday afternoon meeting that had every person that touched a project, that department lead or that person or their team would sit at a table. We had this big conference room table that would seat like 30 people. We would have 30 people at the table. We'd have somebody up on the screen, teams that were out in the field. And we would go for about 2 hours every Friday and we'd talk about every aspect of the project. That was the secret sauce. Not the fucking smart sheet and spreadsheets and reporting and these dashboards and all this automation. It was the getting everybody together and having a conversation about what's going on. Yeah. Where are we at today? Where are we trying to get tomorrow? Mm-hmm. What do we need to do to fill that gap? How does everybody play into that? That was the real magic. Yeah. Right? So, I come away from that going, well, it's the getting the people together and communicating. Yeah. And all the other stuff, now granted, is necessary at a certain level, but I think the primary focus needs to be on the block and tackle, like do your job. Understand what your job is and how that fits into the bigger picture, but do your job. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have Monday meetings, right? Monday morning meetings. The whole office gets together. We do the same thing. But sometimes they get monotonous. And monotony kills me. Like that's one thing that I just can't tolerate. And you get on this cycle and spit out certain things that you think you're supposed to. So every week I walk away and I'm like, man, I don't know if that was valuable or not. I mean, it's valuable to understand where people are, but it's a spot in time. Like it's a regurgitation of events. Mm-hmm. And what that makes me think of is, I'm probably not doing my job in terms of setting people up for success and asking them, what do they need? What do they need? We do ask them that, but I don't know that they're being honest to to come to the table with either giving me information so I can set them up for success, or giving me information so I can better understand their issues or their fires or what it is in the moment. So how do you guys do that as well, in terms of not just going through the same methods during office meetings, or how do you operate during those
like meetings and get together?
Yeah, how do you make it not monotony?
It wants to be. It wants to get there. It's a great question. Our meetings have evolved over the last few months. I like studying interactions and how people come together and share information. I like that interaction, right? So I'm a student of like meetings, and I hate when they get monotonous, and I hate when they just kind of get into this. Well, let's just all talk,
Yeah, I don't like.
To me, that's a huge waste of time. So like a good example. So I'm curious about how other people do it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting to hear, how you guys do it. Well, I've got a friend that's in the construction business, and we were picking his brain the other day about his company. They're older than us, and they're a little bit further down the road than us, but they manage a lot more projects. But it's a really fast pace, like 15 minutes or less per project, and they've got a really clear defined result that they're trying to get out of that. They're not trying to solve any problems on these meetings.
Yeah.
It's just, hey, we're gonna report on what's going on. We're gonna raise a red flag if we need to talk about something. But the real like getting into the meat and potatoes of a problem that gets handled off of this call.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I love that.
And who's on this call? And then who are they? After they deliver this information, what do they do with it?
Well, great. So with this other company, what we're evolving into or trying to is you've got everybody on the company is invited to this call. So that's what we do. I mean, there's a book called Team of Teams, and they have this idea called the shared consciousness meetings, where you invite everybody to the table. And we've been practicing this for years, even back at Torchy's. But I'm a big fan of having everybody involved. Like anybody that's a stakeholder in a project that we're doing, whether it's the owners, the architects, the engineers, the kitchen equipment providers, the civil engineers, like the data guys, everybody, is invited to the call. They don't necessarily get a chance to speak, but they're just listening in to so that way they've got all the information. But what we're trying to do, back to what we're trying to do with our meetings, is be real concise. It's like spend 10 minutes on a project. Where are you at today? Is that where you're supposed to be? What are your next few milestones over the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks? Is there any issue in hitting those milestones? Yes or no? What are the issues? Okay, done. Are we the other layer we're trying to add into that is how are we doing budget wise? Are we on track? Are we behind? Or but just giving a clear indication of kind of what's the overall health of that project at that moment. And we're at any given time we're managing 10 to 12 projects. Well, actually more than that if you consider some of the phase 1 projects. But so we've got a lot going on. So we've got to be really concise so that everybody gets kind of the high points. But people, you get into this, right? And people start talking, and they want to meander.
Oh yeah,
they want to, and I got this guy over here, and he didn't call me back, and
absolutely,
I sent the guy an email, and I don't know. It's like no.
And when that happens, you cut it off in the moment, or do you let them meander?
Well, it just depends. It depends on the mood I'm in that day, I guess. It's
same.
I want to give people the benefit of the doubt because and I want to
give them their platform.
Yeah, and there might be a useful piece of information that we need to hear in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we are trying to dial it back to like, So I'll tell you what we're trying to do now going forward, and we're getting closer to it. Is we talk about a project. Okay, let's talk about this Austin, Texas project. Okay, a schedule pops up on the screen. It's real clear that, okay, here's the week that we're on. The painters are supposed to be there this week, starting to mud the walls. Is that happening or not? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Well, so that means, if you look at the schedule, then next week, the electricians ought to be coming in to trim out plugs. Have you talked to your guy? Are they scheduled for that? Yes or no? No. Okay. Well, if there's a problem there, let's take that offline. What's your CO date? That's my number one pet peeve. Is everybody on a project team needs to know what the finish date is.
Yeah.
And man, I'd tell you that the last, and it doesn't happen very often, but the last few times that I've became very unskillful with my communication and, is when we've asked questions like, hey, what's your CO date? Well, I got to get back to you. I'm like, dude, that is unacceptable.
Yeah.
That's completely unacceptable. Yeah,
that's true.
So it's like, it's about fundamentals. It's like, again, we try to make things really complex. And I think we try to make things complex to make it easier on ourselves. Like it's either it makes an excuse why something can't happen, or we try to build all this stuff so that maybe that'll help us avoid the real work, and the real work is, again, it goes back to, we're trying to influence people. Yeah. What does that involve? That involves tough conversations sometimes. And that involves holding people accountable.
Yeah.
And we don't want it, that, naturally the people don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think I could do better at that, is reminding and as the reminders. Here's what we do. Here's how we do it. Here's the basics. If you're on a project, these are the basic things that you have to know. And I ask you when you get asked, I shouldn't know more about your project than you if you're a project manager, which sometimes happens.
Absolutely.
And I know that people need reminders, right? And so there's let's call it quarterly or monthly. I don't know what it is, but what I also forget is that I care more than the majority, right? Because it's my business. And so I need to do better at those reminders, general reminders of, hey, this is getting off track. Don't meander. Let's stick to the data, or whatever it is. Here's what we need to get out of this meeting or this month or this project or this owner, whatever it is. And those reminders are sometimes get away from me. Mm-hmm. And then I get frustrated, like, why the hell didn't you know this? And maybe they forgot, or I don't know what it is, but I try to throughout the year or month, whatever it is, I try to also remember that I need to remind my staff in order to understand what the basics are and what we're trying to achieve. Because they get down in the trenches and they lose sight of what's important.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty healthy thing to understand in regards to leadership.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And that's an interesting point because, you've got some people on a team that need to stay in the weeds.
Yeah.
Right. And then you've got some people on the team that have the luxury of being up in the clouds a little bit and being able to see the horizon better. Mm-hmm. And, well, I don't want to say it's a rare person that can do both really well, but that's what we're trying to find guys that can do both at all levels, right? That can stay in the weeds, do the block and tackle, like really focus on all the details. And for me, I've got to understand and remember that, if you're in it, right, sometimes you've got blinders on, right? You can't, it's really hard to be able to put all the minutia and all the complexity and the chaos and everything on a project kind of aside, and then step back and pick your head up and be like, okay, well, I'm here now. Where do I need to be tomorrow? Mm-hmm. But what we're trying to build from a structure is, okay, well, our superintendents are in the field. They're in the weeds, right? And they're supposed to be watching every single detail. And then the project managers are like, okay, well, I'm going to stay in the weeds with you a little bit, but I'm going to spend half my time then looking out over the horizon, like where are we supposed to be? And I'm going to help you, the superintendent, remove those obstacles. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it too goes back to, I keep coming back to like the fundamentals and what are we really doing? And it's like, we're influencing people, right? We're influencing people.
Yeah.
we're trying to have a shared vision for everybody involved that is compelling enough that they'll do what they need to do to get us so that everybody gets to the finish line together. And that's the hard part too. You know, it's like, well, what is compelling for a plumber that you have on site, right? They're going to have maybe different motivations than, you know, the electrician or whoever, right? Because you're dealing with all these different companies. But I had an interesting interaction with a superintendent a few months ago that it just reminded me about that. Is, you know, again, we were talking about project management, and we had already started this narrative about, like, you know, let's do the fundamental stuff, and I was just like, well, you know, I asked this one guy who's no longer with us, rightly so, but I said, hey, what would you recommend to help us get a project, you know, more consistently to the end, you know, on schedule? And he kind of hem-hawed around, well, you know, I don't know, maybe, you know, he started talking about writing contracts, and which, you know, he's a superintendent, he doesn't write contracts. Well, maybe, you know, if we did this and this. I said, hey, what about this? What if I could guarantee you $1 million at the end of the project? You know, if you could get this thing done on time, I would hand you a check for $1 million. Put yourself in that mindset. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, oh, yeah. I said, what would you do? And he basically articulated exactly what we're trying to get people to do today. He goes, man, I'd start calling the subcontractors every morning. You know, I'd have my schedule, and I'd call the plumber that, you know, 7:30 in the morning. I'd get on the phone. I'd start. I said, okay, then what would you do? Well, at the end of the day, I'd start calling people again, you know, making sure they're basically. He said he'd fucking manage the project.
He'd do his job.
He would do his job, and he would communicate.
Yeah,
he would check in, and he would, you know what I mean? And I was like, well,
that's an interesting question.
I can't, I'm not going to be able to pay you $1 million at the end of the project, but now you've just told me that you know what to do. Right. So let's, you know, so then, you know, my job is to figure out, well, let's make sure everybody knows what they need to do. And then how do we create a compelling, you know, avenue for them to be able to do that? So how do we create a company that's going to foster people coming in and enjoying doing their jobs that we need them to do?
Yeah. Well, there's inspiration, there's complacency, there's all these things that we battle, right, as managers or business owners. And one of my, and I didn't really realize it until this year, maybe last year, was one of my give backs to the office is creating inspiration, right? I can get people to move, and I can inspire people, and I can talk to them, and I can talk to them as individuals, not, you know, a soulless thing. And I believe I have a skill in order to make things happen. And so one of my reminders whenever I go through the office is noticing, or one of my to-dos as I walk through the office is noticing people that are gravitating towards complacency, or gravitating towards monotony. And I intercept it, and I try to bring them out and get them to move. And having someone there besides me to do that job, I think, is critical, right? Because your world, any job, right? There's always, you get a salary job, you're day to day, you've got your own life that you're trying to deal with. You come to the workplace and you're just trying to get shit done so you can go deal with this other thing. That happens all the time, but how do you keep it from happening on a regular basis? And that's through this leadership or this inspirational moment that you've got to recognize. Either you recognize it or you move it out and you recognize it, or you deal with it in that way. So, that's a tough one. Like that's job security right there for somebody.
Yeah. Well, you know, you look at big companies, you know, and again, Elon Musk is an interesting example of, you know, people clamor to go work for Tesla or SpaceX or whatever else. And, you know, and you know, I know they're dealing with the same problems that we're dealing, just on a much greater level. I mean, they're hiring thousands of people a day, you know, and I'm sure they have processes in place to try to find the right, you know, the best suited people for the job. But I think what keeps people going is the vision of where the company's going.
Sure.
You know, they're part of something that's bigger than them. And they believe in it. And it's like, okay, well, you know, my son-in-law works for Tesla, and he works overnights, and he loves his job. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. Yeah. But he loves it. You know, and you know, I haven't had this specific conversation with him, but I got to believe he is bought into to where Tesla's going. You know, so how do you create that? Because that's what we're really looking for, right?
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, not everybody in your company can be the owner of the company. Yeah. Nor I think some people say they want to be, but they really don't know. You know, it's the whole thing. They don't really know what it means to own a company and what's involved. But so you're going to have the people that are there just putting in their 40 hours a week, or hopefully they're putting in 40 hours a week. Yeah. And so how do you keep them engaged? Yeah. You know, and doing what they need to do. And I think it's that, hey, we're creating a vision. You're sharing the vision. You're letting them have some form of buy-in into that vision. So they've got a type of skin in the game. Yeah. You know, without actually having a financial interest in the company. But
did you ever see I can't remember the guy who started, I can't remember his name, but the guy that started WeWork. Did you ever see that movie?
No, I did not.
I mean, that was on the most extreme, in my mind, the most extreme level of salesmanship and creating an environment that people buy into, because it just seemed like it got really wild and outrageous. But they were engaged and they bought into it, and they wanted to work there because this idea and this success and this guy, and it was almost, it seemed like a very chaotic world, but people bought it. They believed it and they lived it, and that was their life. And when it went down, there was just this distraught, and they didn't know what to do. And to build that type of culture based on one guy's leadership, or you know, believe, like he honestly believed it, to translate that in a way that you can drive masses of people. It's real interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean,
because we're all not right. We're not all, you know, building a, you know, awesome electric car that's going to change the world, or, you know, we're not trying to get to Mars. Right. We don't have these big compelling.
There's a million other architects that were doing the same thing, but how do we create this interest in a little entity that is moving, you know, small masses?
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Day to day, man.
Day to day. It's the block and tackle stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Continuing to believe.
Yeah. Well,
that was a good office talk.
That was a good office talk. Yeah. I like that.
It was a healthy release. Mm-hmm. This is good therapy.
Yeah. Good. Awesome. Well,
appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Appreciate you. It's good. This is good.